I still remember the exact moment it happened. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind that usually feels soft and warm, like a gentle blanket around the house. The sunlight was falling through the curtains, touching the floor in long, calm lines. Everything seemed peaceful. Everything looked normal. But inside my heart, something shifted that day, something I did not expect. I was standing near the kitchen counter, holding a small bowl of cut fruit. I had made it for my husband, like I always did. It was something simple, something I had done for years. It was nothing special, but it was one of those small acts of care that becomes part of your everyday life without you even realizing it. I placed the bowl on the table and waited for him to come in. I remember smiling softly, thinking he would notice it, or at least look at me the way he used to, grateful, warm, or just aware that I was there. But he walked in without even glancing at me. He crossed the room, took his phone, and sat down like I was nothing more than a shadow passing by. He did not say thank you. He did not ask if I had eaten. He did not even meet my eyes. It was such a small moment, so small that no one else would have noticed. But for me, it felt like the world paused. It felt like the light in the room changed. It felt like something inside me quietly fell apart. I stood there, holding the edge of the counter, trying to pretend it did not hurt, trying to breathe in a way that would not betray the heaviness growing in my chest. I told myself he was just tired, or distracted, or stressed. I tried to find excuses for him the way wives often do, even before we realize we're doing it. But that day, the excuses did not help me. They could not soften the truth that pressed against my heart. I felt invisible, in my own home, next to the man I had built my life with. I watched him scroll on his phone, his face calm and distant. And I stood there, unnoticed, as if I were not his wife, but a quiet piece of furniture in the corner of the room. That was the moment. The one that stayed with me. The moment when I realized something inside our home had changed, and I could no longer pretend it hadn't. When I try to understand how things reached that point, I always go back to the early years. The years when my husband, Arif, and I were newly married. The years when the house felt small, but our hearts felt full. Life was not perfect. We did not have much money. We had no fancy furniture, no big plans, nothing glittering or grand. But we had each other. And at that time, that felt like enough. I used to wake up early and make him tea. He would take the cup from my hands gently, as if it was something precious. He would smile at me in a way that made my whole morning bloom like sunlight. Back then he saw me, he noticed me, he appreciated even the smallest things I did. And I loved doing them. I loved caring for him. It made me feel needed, included, important. Our little home was filled with simple laughter and small joys. The sound of boiling tea, the clinking of plates, the two of us sitting close, planning our future even when we had no idea how to build it. Those were the days when a quiet evening walk felt like a celebration, and sharing one plate of food made us feel rich. But life changes slowly, quietly, the way water smooths a stone. You don't notice the change at first. You only feel the difference years later when the stone is no longer the shape it used to be. We had children, two boys, both full of energy, full of questions, full of dreams. They added joy to our home, but they also brought responsibilities. Bills grew, needs grew, the weight on Arif's shoulders grew, and without realizing it, the weight on mine grew too. I handled the children, the home, the meals, the errands, the school meetings.
I learned to manage a home with the quiet skill that mothers around the world seem to carry, holding everything together while standing quietly in the background.
Arif worked long hours, trying to build a good future for us. I respected that. I appreciated that. And I told myself that if he came home tired and a little distant, it was only because he was exhausted. In those days, being unseen felt like a sacrifice I willingly made because I believed it was temporary. I believed the warmth would return once life became easier. But warmth, once lost, does not always come back on its own. As the years passed, our conversations changed. They became shorter. They became sharper. They became more about daily tasks and less about feelings or dreams. Did you pay the bill? Did you get the groceries? Did the boys finish their homework? Functional conversations. Necessary ones, but not the kind that keeps hearts close. We still lived under the same roof, but slowly, almost silently, I felt a thin wall forming between us. Not made of anger, not made of conflict, just made of distance and the silent passing of time. I tried to bridge the space. I tried small things, simple gestures, cooking his favorite meals, keeping the home peaceful, staying up late so we could talk if he wanted to. But some days, even when two people are in the same room, they can feel miles apart. Arif started spending more time with his phone, with the TV, with work messages. When he was home, he looked tired. He looked distracted. He looked like someone living in a different world, a world where I did not exist in full color anymore. And yet, I told myself I had no right to complain. He was working for us. He was providing for us. Wasn't that enough? But there is a difference between living with someone and being seen by someone. I did not need grand gestures. I did not need expensive gifts or loud affection. All I wanted was the feeling that I mattered in his world, that my presence held value in the home I had built with my hands, my time, and my heart. There was a time when I could simply walk into the room and he would look up with warmth. That look had vanished, quietly, softly, without warning. And I found myself searching for it like someone searching for a light switch in the dark. My days became long. I took care of the home like a routine. Cooking, cleaning, preparing, checking, organizing. But the small joys inside those tasks slowly disappeared. A home is not made warm by chores. It is made warm by connection, by being part of someone's inner world. And I could feel that Arif's inner world no longer had a place for me. But I stayed silent. Silent because I did not want to seem needy. Silent because I did not want to add to his stress. Silent because wives often learn to carry their pain quietly, believing it will protect the family. I told myself, maybe things will get better when the children grow up. Maybe when he gets a promotion. Maybe when life slows down. But life did not slow down. If anything, the speed of our days only pushed us farther apart. I remember one evening when I sat beside him on the couch, close enough that our shoulders touched. The children were asleep and the house was quiet. It felt like a perfect moment for a small conversation. So I said softly, "Arif, how was your day?" He did not look up. He did not smile. He only gave a short, tired answer. "Same as always." And that was it. No question back. No curiosity about my day. No gentle sign that he wanted to talk. I sat there for a few minutes, feeling like a guest in my own living room. Then I slowly stood up and went to the kitchen, pretending to tidy things that were already clean. That moment stayed with me, not because it was painful, but because it was familiar. It had become normal. My emotional loneliness had become a quiet habit. It is strange how a heart can adjust to emptiness the same way eyes adjust to darkness. Little by little, we stop noticing what we've lost. Still, I loved him. Not with the bright, excited love of early marriage, but with the steady, patient love of a woman who believes in her family. I told myself that love means staying. Love means understanding. Love means enduring. But love does not mean becoming invisible. I would learn that lesson much later. For now, I kept moving through my days with quiet hope. Hope that maybe one morning he would look at me and see the woman who had stood beside him through every storm. Hope that maybe one evening he would put down his phone and ask how I was feeling. Hope that something would reconnect us. But the truth is, the small moments we ignore become the big moments that break us. And the day he made me feel invisible, that day did not happen suddenly. It was the final drop in a cup that had been slowly filling for years. Yet, even then, I did not know how deeply that moment would shake me. I did not know that it would become the beginning of a painful awakening, an awakening to the quiet, unspoken truth that love, even old love, needs to be tended, noticed, cherished. Otherwise, it fades, not with sound, not with anger, but with silence. The weeks after that moment in the kitchen felt different, even though nothing dramatic happened on the surface. The house still looked the same rugs, the same curtains, the same old clock ticking on the wall. But inside me, something had shifted, something small but steady, like a quiet ripple spreading across calm water. I started noticing things I had ignored before, little things, small habits, moments that passed quickly but left marks on my heart. It began with the mornings. I would wake up early, make breakfast, and place his cup of tea on the table just the way he liked it. Light, not too hot. I waited for him to join me. I waited for a good morning. I waited for even a short look that said he appreciated the effort. But he began rushing past me, grabbing the cup without stopping. He drank it while checking his phone, scrolling through messages, reading news, or replying to someone from work. Sometimes he didn't drink the tea at all. It would just sit there, cooling quietly on the table. I found myself staring at that untouched cup, feeling like it was a symbol of something larger, something missing. One morning I said gently, "Your tea will get cold." He didn't even turn around. "I'll drink it later," he said. He didn't. I poured it down the sink when he left for work. It wasn't about the tea, it was the feeling that my efforts no longer mattered. Another day, I tried to talk to him as he got ready. "Do you want paradas today or bread?" He didn't answer. I thought he hadn't heard me, so I asked again. This time he said, "Anything, it doesn't matter." But it mattered to me. I wanted to feel connected. I wanted to feel needed. I stood there in the kitchen, holding the spatula, staring at the stove, wondering when my voice had become background noise in my own home. As days passed, the feeling grew stronger. Every corner of the house carried echoes of us, old memories, shared laughter, quiet promises. But now, those memories felt like old photographs, fading at the edges. The boys were busy with school and their own lives. It was natural. Children grow. They love us, but they also drift into their own worlds. I understood that. But when both my children and my husband drifted away at the same time, it left me standing alone on an island I didn't recognize. One evening, we sat at the dining table for dinner. I had cooked their favorite dishes, things that used to bring everyone together. Biryani for the boys, a simple chicken curry for Arif, fresh salad on the side. When I placed the plates on the table, the boys took theirs quickly and went to their rooms, saying they had assignments. Arif took his plate and carried it to the living room so he could watch TV. No one asked me to join. No one said thank you. No one even looked at me. I stood in the doorway watching them walk away, holding the serving spoon against my chest. The sound of the TV filled the home, loud and careless, drowning the silence building inside me. That night, I ate alone at the table. Just me. The food felt tasteless not because of the spices, but because it wasn't shared. Food, after all, is not only for the stomach. It feeds the heart when eaten together. When Arif finished eating, he left his empty plate on the table and continued watching TV. He didn't bring it to the sink. He didn't look at me. He simply got up and walked away. A tiny pain grew inside my chest as I picked up his plate. It wasn't the act of cleaning that hurt. I had been cleaning for years. It was the absence of even a small acknowledgement. A simple thank you holds the power to make a home feel warm. Its absence chills the entire room.
The next few days followed the same pattern. Arif would come home tired. He would greet the boys with a smile. He would ask them about school, about their games, about their homework. But when he passed me, he would just give a small nod, like someone acknowledging a distant neighbor, not a wife. I tried to join conversations. I tried sitting beside him. I tried placing snacks next to him as he watched TV. He barely noticed. One evening, he came home late. I had waited for him, keeping the dinner warm. When he walked in, I asked quietly, "You came late today. Is everything okay?" He replied, "Work things," without explaining further. Then he sat on the couch scrolling through his phone, not even removing his shoes. I sat beside him and asked, "Do you want to eat now?" He didn't look up. "In a bit," he said. Minutes passed. Those minutes turned into an hour. The food grew cold. Finally, when I asked again, he sighed lightly. Not loudly, not angrily, just a small sigh that carried exhaustion and irritation. That sigh cut deeper than words could. He said, "I'll eat later. You go rest." But how could I rest when my heart felt heavy? How could I rest in a home where my presence didn't seem to matter? Afternoons became the quietest part of my day. The boys were at school, Arif was at work. The house was silent, except for the soft humming of the ceiling fan. I would sit near the window with my cup of tea, watching birds land on the boundary wall outside. That window became my companion, the one place where I could breathe freely. Sometimes I would take out old photo albums and look through them. Pictures from our early marriage, trips we took, birthdays, smiles, moments full of hope. Those pictures made me wonder, where did we lose ourselves? When did we stop seeing each other? When did I become a quiet part of the background? It's strange how life can change without any loud moments. Not with fights, not with anger, but with silence. Slow, steady silence, the kind that grows heavier every day.
One day, I tried something different. I prepared a special dinner, his favorite. I set the table nicely, lit a small candle, and even wore the soft blue shawl he once said looked nice on me. When he came home, I smiled and said, "I made your favorite dish today." He nodded. okay, and walked past me. No excitement, no softness. He sat down at the table without noticing the candle or the effort. He ate quietly. He didn't comment on the food. He didn't ask why the table looked nicer than usual. It was as if I had decorated the home for a ghost. When he finished, he pushed the chair back and said, "I'm tired. I'm going to sleep early." He didn't see the disappointment on my face. He didn't see the way my hands trembled as I picked up his plate. He didn't see the candle flickering slowly, burning for someone who didn't even notice it was there. And yet, I blew out the candle gently, as though covering a wound with a soft cloth. A few days later, something else happened that stayed with me. We were invited to a small family gathering. I dressed nicely, wearing a simple outfit I liked. I hoped Arif would notice. Even one compliment would have meant so much. Before leaving, I asked him softly, "How do I look?" He looked at me for less than a second and said, "Fine," before turning away. Just fine. Not even a real look. In the past, he would have smiled. He would have said something sweet. He would have noticed every small detail. But now, I felt like a piece of furniture again, something that existed without being seen. At the gathering, he talked with others, laughed with others, listened to others. But with me, he was quiet. He didn't walk beside me. He didn't check if I was comfortable. He didn't hold my hand. He didn't include me in conversations. I stood there among familiar faces, feeling strangely alone. People talked around me. The room was loud. But inside me, there was only silence. At one point, I stepped aside and stood near the hallway, pretending to adjust my shawl. I watched him talking and smiling with others. He looked alive, present, engaged. And I wondered quietly, why did he not look at me that way anymore? Why did he save his attention for everyone except me? I drove home with a heavy heart. That night, when he fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. The fan rotated slowly. The night felt cold, and my chest felt tight with unspoken questions. I whispered in the dark, "What am I doing wrong?" The silence gave no answers. Then came a moment that deepened the slow pain even further. One evening, I wasn't feeling well. My body felt tired, my head ached. I had spent the whole day cleaning, cooking, and running errands. By the time Arif came home, I could barely stand straight. When he entered, I said softly, "I'm not feeling well today." He nodded without concern. "Oh, okay," he said. Then he turned on the TV and sat down. Just that. No what happened, no do you want to rest, no offer to help. I stood in the kitchen, holding the counter for balance, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. The silence between us felt like a cold wall. Even when I served his dinner, he didn't notice my weakness. He didn't ask why I wasn't eating. He didn't see the exhaustion in my face. After finishing his meal, he simply said, "I'm going to sleep," and walked away. I cleaned the kitchen slowly, stopping now and then because the dizziness made the room tilt. When I finally sat on the edge of the bed, he was already asleep. I felt like I was living in a home where my pain made no sound. I whispered, "Why can't you see me?" But the only response was the soft hum of the ceiling fan. The conflict wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with fights or arguments. It was made of quiet wounds, of moments when I felt alone while standing next to the person I loved, of small disappointments that began stacking up inside me like stones. And there's something important I learned during those days. A heart doesn't break all at once. It breaks quietly, piece by piece, when someone stops noticing. I kept hoping things would change. I kept waiting for him to see me again, to talk to me, to sit beside me, to share even a small moment of closeness. But the space between us only grew wider. The silence became heavier. The loneliness wrapped itself around me like a thin blanket I could never take off. And deep inside, I knew something was coming, a moment that would reveal the truth I had been avoiding, a moment that would shake my world. The rising conflict was not a battle of words, but a battle of being unseen. And soon, the turning point would arrive, quiet, sudden, and painful. I think every story in a home has a moment when everything shifts. A moment when the quiet things we ignore finally speak louder than our voices. For me, that moment came on a soft evening, one that began just like any other. Nothing special, nothing dramatic, just the calm before truth I was not ready to hold. It started with rain, the kind that taps gently on the windows and makes the world feel smaller, wrapped in a soft blanket of sound. I remember standing near the kitchen counter, wiping it with a cloth, even though it was already clean. Sometimes, when the heart is full, the hands look for something to do. My husband Kamal walked in carrying his phone in his hand. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry either. Just far. Like he had taken a step away from me, one I had not seen. I noticed it right away, the same way you notice when a picture on the wall hangs slightly crooked. A small thing, but enough to disturb the room. "Everything okay?" I asked softly. He nodded, too quickly. "Just work," he said. His tone felt like a door gently closing. Not loud, not rude, just shutting me out. I wanted to ask more, but something stopped me. Maybe fear, maybe exhaustion. Maybe the quiet understanding that whatever was changing in him had begun long before this moment. He walked past me, placed his phone face down on the table, and went to the living room. I followed a few minutes later with tea, out of habit. Tea has a way of filling spaces when words cannot. But when I entered the room, he didn't look up. I placed his cup on the table next to the phone he had been guarding like a fragile secret. "Thank you," he said politely, almost formally. I could have been anyone. A guest, a stranger. That soft crack inside me widened a little. It's strange how a small object can become the center of a storm. That phone had been lying there all evening, glowing every few minutes with new messages. For the first time in my marriage, I felt afraid of a device, afraid of what it might hold. Not because I suspected betrayal, not in the way people usually mean it. No. My fear was simpler and maybe sadder. I feared that he had a life inside that phone, a life that did not include me, a life where he laughed more, spoke more, shared more. I watched him from the corner of my eye. Every time the phone buzzed, he stiffened slightly. Not enough to seem guilty, enough to seem emotionally elsewhere. "Come on," I whispered. He looked up, finally catching my eyes. For a moment, I saw something like hesitation, or maybe it was guilt, or even sadness. The kind you feel when you know you're hurting someone without meaning to. "Yes," he said. "Are you happy?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. He blinked, surprised. "Why would you ask that?" he said. "I don't know," I whispered. "Sometimes I feel like I'm losing you. Not because of a fight, not because of anger, just because we forgot how to hold each other." He didn't answer right away. And silence, when it comes between a husband and wife, is the heaviest thing in a room. "Let's not start this, please," he said gently, rubbing his forehead. "I'm tired." I nodded. I always nodded. I always stepped back first. I told myself it was kindness, but maybe it was fear. Fear of losing the little that remained. That night, something small happened, but it cut deep. I served dinner as usual: rice, vegetables, a bit of chicken, simple food, comforting food. I placed a plate in front of him the way I had done for more than 2 decades. He didn't touch it, not immediately, not after a few minutes, not even after I reminded him softly, "The food is getting cold." He was staring at the television, but he wasn't really watching. His mind was somewhere far away. When I finally said, "Should I warm it again?" he blinked, like someone waking from a dream. "Oh, I already ate outside," he said. My hand froze around the spoon. "You already ate?" I repeated. "Yes, I forgot to tell you." He said it casually, as if forgetting me was something ordinary. The room felt suddenly chilly, though the stove was still warm. I forced a smile, a weak, trembling thing. "It's okay," I whispered, because somehow those were the only words I ever knew how to use when something hurt. But inside, my heart folded into itself, like a piece of paper being creased again and again until it tears. I sat down slowly and ate alone. The sound of my spoon against the plate felt louder than the rain. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and he didn't know what to say. Sometimes silence is not the absence of words, it is the absence of care. Later that night, long after he had fallen asleep, I sat at the edge of the bed. The street lights outside were soft, turning the curtains into pale gold. It should have been a comforting scene, but it wasn't. I looked at him, his peaceful face, his steady breathing. This was the man I had loved, cared for, prayed for, built a life with. How had we reached a point where he no longer saw me? Not as an enemy, not as a burden, just invisible. I touched his hand gently, like testing a memory. He didn't stir. Something inside me broke softly, not with noise, not with drama, just a quiet realization. I was still in this home, but I was no longer part of his life. Not truly, not fully. And the hardest part was knowing he wasn't cruel. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He was simply drifting away from me, one small choice at a time. A dinner he forgot to tell me about, a conversation he didn't want to have, a phone he held closer than my hand. The heartbreak wasn't sudden. It was slow, gentle. almost polite. But it was real. The real turning point came the next morning. It was simple, almost ordinary. I was making tea when he walked into the kitchen. He seemed tense, like he had rehearsed something in his mind. "We need to talk," he said. My hands trembled slightly, but I kept stirring the pot. "Okay," I whispered. He cleared his throat. I think we should give each other some space." The spoon slipped from my hand and clashed against the counter. That tiny sound echoed through my entire body. "Space?" I repeated. "Yes," he said quietly. "I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to fight. But I feel like I can't breathe sometimes. I feel like the house is too tight, like the air is too heavy." I stared at him. A man who once could not sleep unless my head rested on his shoulder now found my presence too heavy. "I never wanted to suffocate you," I whispered. My voice cracked. He softened. "I know. You're not doing anything wrong. I just need to find myself again." Find himself. I wondered when he had lost himself, and why he didn't think I could help him look. "Where will you go?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe stay with a friend. Maybe take a small trip. A small trip. A small escape. A small step away from the marriage we had built with years of shared breaths." "I need to breathe," he repeated. I nodded, because what else could I do? Hold him by the collar and force him to stay? That isn't love. Love is not captivity. Love is not begging. Love is letting the person you care for go where their heart is pulling them, even if it pulls them away from you. He left 3 days later. Not forever. He never used the word leave. He said break. He said space. Words that are gentle on the tongue, but sharp inside the heart. I packed a small bag for him while he showered. A shirt he liked. A sweater I had knitted years ago. He didn't touch that sweater, though. He folded it aside politely. When he stepped out of the house, suitcase in hand, I stood at the door. "Take care," I whispered. He paused. For a moment, I thought he would look at me, hold me, say something that could close the wound. But he just nodded. Nothing more. The door closed quietly behind him. Not a slam, not an angry exit. Just a soft, ordinary click. Almost like the closing of a book whose last chapter you didn't realize you had already read. The house felt enormous. Every corner echoed with memories. The teacups we used together, the chair he always sat in, the faint smell of his perfume in the hallway. And yet, the silence felt heavier than his presence ever did. I sat on the sofa and stared at the empty space beside me. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be lonely, even when nothing is physically missing. He took nothing from the house, but his absence took everything from me. That quiet moment, sitting alone, staring at the cold cup of tea, was when I fully realized the life we had built together had slipped through my fingers without a single fight, without a single loud moment. It was not a story of anger. It was a story of distance, of slow forgetting, of becoming invisible in the home I once felt safe in. That was my turning point. The moment I understood that love doesn't always end with storms. Sometimes it ends with silence. And sometimes the softest heartbreaks are the ones that never make a sound. The first morning after he left was the longest morning of my life. I woke up before dawn the way I always did, but the air felt different, still, too quiet, as if the house itself was waiting for him to return. For the long moment I lay there, staring at the empty space on the bed. The pillow still carried the faint shape of his head. I touched it gently, the way someone touches a bruise, softly, knowing it will hurt. I didn't cry, not yet. Sometimes the heart becomes numb before it becomes soft. I got up slowly, tied my hair, and walked to the kitchen. The kettle sat where it always sat, the cups lined neatly, the sugar jar half full. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had.
The chair he used every morning was empty. For the first time in years, I made tea for only one person. As I poured it, I whispered to myself, "You're okay. You're still here." It wasn't a declaration of strength. It was a reminder, a small rope for me to hold on to. Days passed slowly. Each one felt strangely heavy, as if time had thickened. I moved through the house like someone walking through a memory. Dust settled on the table sooner than I expected. Perhaps it had always been this way, but I had never noticed. I swept the floors twice a day, though they didn't need it. I cooked food I didn't eat. I folded clothes that no one would wear. Sometimes healing doesn't look brave. Sometimes it looks like simply continuing because stopping feels even more painful. I kept expecting the sound of his key turning in the lock, expecting his footsteps in the hallway, expecting him to ask where the salt was or whether I'd seen his blue shirt. But he didn't come. And slowly, I began to understand that this silence, this distance, wasn't temporary for him. He wasn't on a break from me. He was slipping into a new life where my presence was no longer needed to breathe. One afternoon, my younger sister came to see me. Her face softened the moment she saw me. "Have you eaten?" she asked. I smiled, though my eyes felt tired. "Yes," I said, a simple lie, one I told myself too. She sat beside me on the sofa and took my hand. "You don't have to pretend," she whispered. I looked at her and felt something break. Not sharply, but gently, like a worn thread snapping. "I don't know who I am without him," I admitted. She squeezed my hand. "You are still you," she said softly. "You are someone before him. You are someone now, but you forgot. And now you have to remember." I didn't believe her, but the warmth of her voice sat in my heart like a small candle, a little light in a dark place. Before leaving, she said, "You are not alone. You just feel alone. There is a difference." I didn't understand it then, but those words would matter later. A week passed, then two. One morning, my phone buzzed. I picked it up, hoping, foolishly maybe, that it was him. But it wasn't. It was a message from one of his friends, Rafiq. We weren't close, but he was someone who had known Kamal for years. His message was simple. "He's okay. Give him time." Just reading that brought a strange relief. He hadn't disappeared into some emotional darkness. He was alive. He was functioning. He was okay. But then a second thought came, one that cut deeper. He was okay without me. I stared at the message for a long time. Then, with a trembling hand, I typed back, "Thank you." I wanted to ask more. Where he was, who he was with, whether he had eaten, whether he had thought of me. But I didn't. Love sometimes looks like letting go of the questions that burn inside you. I held myself together for many days, but healing isn't linear. It arrives like waves.
gentle at first, then strong enough to pull you under. One night, after trying to distract myself with cleaning, cooking, and pointless chores, I finally sat down at the dining table. His chair was still pulled out slightly. He always sat that way. I had never corrected him. Seeing it broke me. I placed my forehead on my arms and cried, deeply, quietly. I cried for the years we had loved each other. I cried for the woman I used to be. I cried for the version of him I missed. And most of all, I cried for the fear that he would never come back. Not physically, but emotionally. Tears are strange things. They hurt, but they also soften. They clean wounds the heart didn't know it carried. When I finally lifted my head, my chest felt lighter. Not healed, not yet, but softer. The next morning, something shifted in me. Not strength, not confidence, just a simple decision. I needed to take care of myself, even if only a little. I opened the windows and let sunlight in. The house felt warmer. The air felt cleaner. I made breakfast, a real one, and actually ate it. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. I walked to the nearby market, bought fresh vegetables, smiled at a neighbor. Every step felt uncomfortable, like wearing new shoes. But I took them anyway. Healing is not a lightning strike. It is a slow, consistent warmth. And that morning felt like the first ray of that warmth. A few weeks later, the phone finally rang. Not a message, not someone checking on me. It was him. My heart raced. I stared at the screen for a long second before answering. "Hello?" I said softly. There was a pause on the other side. A long, heavy pause. Then his voice, tired and quieter than before. "Are you okay?" The question felt almost unfair. I wanted to say, "No, I'm not. How could I be?" But I didn't. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm okay." He sighed, a slow, shaky breath. "I'm sorry," he said. My throat tightened. Sorry for what? Leaving? Hurting me? Needing space? Feeling lost? I didn't ask. "Are you coming home?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. He hesitated. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I'm still confused. But I wanted to hear your voice." I closed my eyes. The ache in my chest softened a little. We talked for 5 minutes. Nothing deep, nothing emotional, but it was the first real connection we had in weeks. And even if it wasn't a promise, it was something. When he hung up, I felt tears in my eyes again, but these tears were different. Not heartbreak, not despair. They were the tears of someone who sees a small, distant light after walking a long time in the dark. That afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror. It had been a long time since I really looked at myself. The woman staring back wasn't the strong girl I once was. Her eyes were tired. Her hair had more gray strands. Her shoulders slouched slightly. But she was still here. still breathing, still standing. And slowly, I began to see something else in her reflection, a quiet strength I had forgotten. For years, I had poured myself into my marriage, into the home, into him. I had forgotten that I existed as a separate person, someone with her own heart, her own identity, her own worth. And now, alone in that still room, I whispered to the mirror, "You are enough." Even if he doesn't come back, even if life changes, you are enough. The words tasted strange, but they felt right. In the days that followed, I began doing small things that made me feel human again. I planted new flowers in the balcony. I took evening walks. I started journaling, just simple lines, nothing fancy. I am learning. I am breathing. I am still capable of love. Every page felt like a step forward. I didn't hate him. I didn't resent him. Pain and anger are not the same. I still cared for him, but now I was learning to care for myself too. Love can stay even when someone leaves, but self-love must grow, especially when someone leaves. And then, one quiet evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it slowly. There he was, Kamal, holding the same suitcase he had taken with him weeks ago. The sweater I had packed now hung loosely in his hand. He looked exhausted. His face carried guilt, confusion, and something softer, something like longing. "I didn't know where else to go," he whispered. I didn't answer. I simply stepped aside and let him in. He sat on the sofa, the same sofa where he had ignored his dinner weeks before. But now he looked broken in a way I had never seen. "I thought leaving would clear my mind," he said. "But all it did was show me what I was losing." I stayed silent, letting him speak at his own pace. "I felt trapped, but not because of you, because of myself. I lost joy in everything, work, life, even in us. And instead of telling you, I ran." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I'm sorry for making you feel invisible in your own home." Those words, those simple, honest words, felt like a soft hand touching my heart. I didn't forgive him instantly. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a slow blossoming. But I did understand him. And sometimes understanding is the first step toward healing. I sat beside him, not close, but not far either. "We both lost something," I whispered. "But maybe we can find it again. Slowly, carefully." He nodded, eyes shining with a mix of relief and regret. "We can try," he said softly. And that was enough for now. Not a promise, but a beginning. We didn't fix everything overnight, We didn't suddenly become the couple we once were, but we began rebuilding, gently, step by step. A cup of tea shared at the table again. Short walks in the evening, conversations that were honest, even when they were uncomfortable. We learned to listen. We learned to pause. We learned that love isn't only holding on. Sometimes it's stepping back, breathing, and returning with a softer heart. I realized something important. Healing doesn't mean going back to what you were. It means becoming something stronger, something quieter, something kinder. We weren't perfect, but we were trying, together this time. And that, for me, was the beginning of peace. Sometimes I look back at the night he returned, the way he stood at the door with tired eyes, holding the same suitcase he had left with, and I realize something important. Life does not fall apart in a single day, and it does not heal in a single day either. Healing is like a slow sunrise. You don't see the light all at once, but little by little, the darkness becomes softer. In the weeks that followed, our home became a quieter place, but not in a painful way. The silence felt gentler, more respectful, more honest. We began doing simple things together again. Nothing big, nothing dramatic, just small, human things. Sharing tea without rushing, sitting on the balcony and watching the sky change colors, talking for a few minutes before bed, even when the day had been long. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes I did. Sometimes neither of us had the right words, but even those shared silences felt warmer than the ones we had before. One evening, he held the cup of tea I made and said, "I am learning. I hope that is enough." I looked at him and nodded. "Learning is always enough," I replied softly, "as long as we keep walking forward." And that became our quiet promise. Not to be perfect, not to pretend, not to erase the hurt, but to walk forward together, even with small steps. There came a morning when I was stirring the pot on the stove, and he walked into the kitchen. Before I could speak, he said, "Did you sleep well?" It was such a simple question, just 5 words, but it carried a feeling that had been missing for a long time. He saw me, not as a shadow, not as the background of his life, but as a person that mattered. A few days later, when I placed dinner on the table, he touched my hand gently and said, "Thank you for the meal." And the softness in his voice felt like a window reopening. I didn't need grand gestures, just awareness, just presence, just a sense that I had a place in my own home. And slowly, so slowly, I barely noticed at first, that feeling returned. Forgiveness is not a single moment. It is a quiet decision you make over and over, each time your heart remembers the pain. I didn't forget what happened. I didn't erase the hurt. But I forgave him because holding on to pain only weakens the hand that carries it. Forgiveness felt like setting down a heavy bag I had carried for too long. It didn't mean the journey was over, but it made the walk easier. There were days when old fears returned, days when he seemed distant again, days when I wondered if he might slip away. But this time, instead of hiding my feelings, I spoke. Quietly, softly, honestly. And for the first time in many years, he listened. Not with guilt, not with anger, not with impatience. He listens the way people listen when they are afraid of losing something precious again. And that, more than anything, helped us rebuild. What surprised me most wasn't that he changed. It was that I changed too. I began doing things I had forgotten I loved. Reading books slowly in the evening, watering plants on the balcony, writing small thoughts in my journal. I realized that I had spent so many years being a wife, a mother, a caretaker, that I had forgotten to simply be myself. But now, with time and space, I began finding the woman inside me again, the one who used to laugh softly, who used to dream quietly, who used to believe she mattered. And as I grew, our relationship grew with me, because love is stronger when both people remain whole. One night, months after everything had happened, we sat together on the balcony. There was a soft breeze. The sky was painted in gentle blue and pink. I rested my hands on my lap, and he rested his beside mine. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. After a long moment, he whispered, "I almost lost you." I looked at him and smiled, a small, forgiving smile. "I almost lost myself, too," I replied. He nodded, eyes wet, but calm. "And now?" "And now," I said, "we are learning again." He reached for my hand, and I let him hold it. Not out of habit, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. In that moment, sitting beneath the fading sky, I realized something. Sometimes love changes shape. Sometimes it becomes quieter, slower, softer. But soft love can still be strong. Soft love can still survive. If someone asked me what I learned from all of this, I would say it simply. Never let your heart become invisible, not to others and not to yourself. People forget. People drift. People get lost inside their own storms. But you must remember your own worth. You must hold on to your own identity. You must stay visible to yourself, even when others fail to see you. And if they return, if they truly return, let them meet a stronger, softer, more whole version of you. Because love that survives distance and grows after pain becomes something deeper, something wiser, something real. And I am grateful for that, not because everything is perfect now, but because we are no longer walking blind. We see each other. We hear each other. We choose each other every day, in small ways, in quiet ways. And that is enough.